When I was elected, I committed to doing everything I can to make our rural communities feel safe. That's why I've been pleased to visit today the beautiful Thoresby Estate in the heart of Sherwood Forest. But today, I've heard loud and clear that there's work to be done to protect our beauty spots from illegal activity. Rural safety is at the heart of my new police and crime plan. I've been listening, and I will make sure that I consider rural safety in my police and crime plan. I will do everything in my power to protect places like this from being used by criminals.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for turning out. I know that the show is still in full swing out there, but I think this is a really important meeting, so I'm very grateful for your attention this afternoon. My name's Andy Guy. I'm the County Advisor for the NFU in Nottinghamshire. We've been lucky to have the presence of the Police and Crime Commissioner elected in the spring this year for Nottinghamshire, Commissioner Caroline Henry. Sitting next to Commissioner Henry is Chief Inspector Heather Sutton, who has the lead for rural policing in Nottinghamshire. And just while we're here, not on the top table, but I guess they might contribute something, we've got a couple of other people down here. We've got Beat Team Sergeant Simon Whitehouse and Neighbourhood and Wildlife Crime Sergeant Christian Hurley sitting in the front row. So hopefully they're going to be able to contribute a little bit during the afternoon. We've got a few questions to come, I'm sure, in the room. But I think, first of all, I'd like to hand over to Commissioner Henry to say a few words and introduce herself, I guess, and explain what she's hoping to get out of this afternoon.
Thank you very much, Andy. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much for coming to join me today for what is a rural crime Have Your Say community event. This is one of a series of events I'm holding across Nottinghamshire, and it will provide you an opportunity for you to tell me about your crime and community safety issues, what matters most to you, your family and your community. I was delighted to have been elected to the Police and Crime Commissioner back in May, and I did that on a pledge to level up policing across Nottinghamshire, to invest in visible frontline policing, and to be tough on crime, and to put victims and residents at the heart of all our policing priorities. In taking office, I have a duty to issue a police and crime plan for Nottinghamshire. Now, this is going to set direction of local policing for the next 4 years, and my plan is going to be based on 3 simple priorities: preventing crime and protecting people from harm, improving the police and partnership response to crime and antisocial behaviour, and supporting victims and communities to be safe, and really importantly, to feel safe. First and foremost, I want to prevent crime from happening in the first place. A problem profile produced by Nottinghamshire Neighbourhood Policing Hub in July 2021 highlighted 159 specific rural crimes across Nottinghamshire in 2021. Now, this was actually a reduced level on 2017, which was 297 crimes. However, we know that when a crime does occur in rural areas, the cost of the crime is far greater than average. I read the survey that you gave to me, Andy, and the NFU survey anticipated the average cost of crime over an 18-month period to be approximately £6,600 per victim. This is why I'm determined to focus on preventing crimes in our rural areas from happening in the first place, and I'm really keen to hear your ideas today on how to do this. My second priority is to ensure that we're really effective in our response to crime and to the issues that are of greatest concern to our communities, and this is where I need your help. I want to know what are your main crime and community issues in your areas. I want to hear about your experience with the police, and I want to know what we can do better. I've seen the results of the NFU survey conducted recently, and in Nottinghamshire, when people were asked for their level of confidence in how Nottinghamshire police would respond to a burglary, 74% felt a call to 999 will be answered in a reasonable time. But I was really disappointed that only 38% that felt that the police would attend their premises while the crime was still in progress. Under my watch, I want to change the experience so those in rural communities have greater confidence in our police response. My third and final priority is to better support victims and communities to feel safe and to be safe. With some really excellent victim support services in Nottinghamshire, but I want them to be even better. So these are my provisional priorities for Nottinghamshire. So based on the information I've received to date and the conversations I've had with local residents across the county. But today I really want to hear your views. I want to know whether you think these priorities are the right priorities for Nottinghamshire, and particularly for our rural community. And I'm here to listen today. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Chief Inspector, do you want to add anything?
I'll just introduce myself. I have seen some of you before, so it's nice to see your faces here again today. I'm Chief Inspector Heather Sutton. I'm the lead for Rural and Wildlife Crime for Notts Police. I'm also the Napier Policing Chief Inspector for the county. Prior to that, I was a Napier Policing Inspector for Newark and Sherwood for the last 3 years. So I've worked in rural communities for some time now. I am the chair of the Regional Enforcement Group, where a number of bodies and neighbouring forces come together to share best practice, identify cross-border issues, and I also sit on the national working group as well. With me is Christian Hurley. So Christian's a beat sergeant based at Ollerton Police Station, but he's also the Wildlife and Rural Crime Sergeant and delivers a lot of the operational activity. And Simon Whitehouse is beat sergeant over at Bassett Law and is the off-road bike team sergeant. So this is obviously the PCC's listening event. It's also an opportunity for myself to update you on some of the work that we've been doing, and Christian and Simon can give you kind of some operational context to that as well.
Thank you very much. So I guess the thing really is to hear from these guys about what their experiences are. Wonder if anybody would like to start out with a question. Does anybody have anything that they want to raise? John, do you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, as much as it's not so much our experiences, but I just wanted to start with, you use the phrase to level up the list on the NOS. I appreciate it in a conservative police function. And personally, I think they...
The reason we've got mics, sir, is because we're actually live streaming what's happening today. So for those people who couldn't be here today, no, it's worth mentioning. It's worth mentioning actually. Anything that does get said today will be recorded. We're live streaming it. So for those people who couldn't be, we know it's a really busy time for farmers and people, so you can watch it later. So it's going to be on my Facebook channels.
So. Is it actually working? It'll be recording.
It'll be recording for that.
Okay, so to level up policing within Notts. I mean, I actually hate the phrase levelling up because it means absolutely bugger all to most people, and it means anything to everybody else. Now, firstly, what do you mean by levelling up within the county? And secondly, what makes you think that it's achievable? Because I think you mean, but it would be nice for you to clarify it. Thank you.
I do actually try and keep politics out of this job.
No, I appreciate that, but to be fair, the terminology has come from the Conservative. It's in NFU parlance as well.
Yeah. Before I became Police and Crime Commissioner, I spent an awful lot of time going all over the county, not just in the city. And the common I was getting from listening to in the villages and in the towns was that they felt all the resources were going into the city, not into the county. And I know we've got huge issues in the city, and I'm not looking to take any resources away from the city, but where I can, if I can bring extra resources in, I want to make sure that those people in the county feel they get a really good response.
No, that's exactly what I was hoping you were going to say. Now, what makes you confident? Because if you like, that will only work if you are able to introduce new and extra resource. And how confident are you that you will be able to do that?
Well, I've already brought in an extra 2 million since I've been elected. For some safer street work. It was 2 lots of bids that I put in, and I will continue to put bids. And those bids actually went. One was for Mansfield area, one actually was for the city, but one was for Worksop and one was for Ashfield area. So I am making sure when I put the bids in, not everything's focused on the city. I'm looking where there's areas that need help, and I will put bids in accordingly.
Just out of interest, and I don't think it'll be me, but can you elaborate that when you put in bids, where are those bids going for a start?
Yeah.
And what is the process by which that you attract extra funding?
Yeah. The bids go into the Home Office. They're actually it was a Safer Streets bid. The last one was particularly around making sure women and girls feel safe in the evening. So there's different pots of money we can bid into. And I'm really proud to say I've got more money in Nottinghamshire for the bids I've put in than any other county in the country. I've worked really hard on these bids, and I'm also doing a bit of a pincer movement with my MPs, working cross-party too, but making sure that when we put a bid in, we absolutely do a really compelling, strong bid, evidence-based, and I make sure that my MPs also lobby like mad to the Home Secretary or the Policing Minister, even to Boris and Rishi myself, I've been there, to make sure that Nottinghamshire doesn't get forgotten. Because I think the East Midlands historically hasn't always been funded particularly well. So I am really lobbying hard to bring extra money in. And there'll be some more. I've also had £1.9 million worth of money to support violence against women and girls. It's domestic abuse and serious sexual violence. Put some support in people go through the court system. Youth endowment fund, that's over £1 million I've brought in. I'm working really hard to get the money so we can deliver for Nottinghamshire.
It'd be helpful if I gave a bit of an update as
Absolutely.
to where we are now. So I recognise a few faces in this room who've been to the kind of kitchen events and contributed to Andy's survey and that have met at other events. So I think everybody's aware that since I took over the role, can everyone hear me okay? Yeah. Everyone's aware that since I took over the role in April, I've kind of been trying to do a bit of a sit rep in the position that Notts Police is in at the minute in our offer on rural crime, how we can improve that in terms of additional resources, equipment, additional training, as well as some of the strategic themes that we can put in place to improve our resources. So you would have probably seen in the media Operation Uplift, which was the promise from Boris Johnson around the additional boots on the ground for police forces, and then how the Chief Constable has distributed that across Notts Police and recruited into Notts Police. So there has been a heavy recruitment into Nottinghamshire Police, and I've seen that certainly on the numbers of officers that now parade on in our response teams and also in our neighbourhood policing teams. The Chief Constable has committed to adding additional resources to our neighbourhood policing teams in the next year. So the response teams are the ones that respond to the 999 calls, and the neighbourhood policing teams are the beat managers that you would probably have your most intervention with, who will deal with kind of long-term problem solving and specific issues within your area. So being the Chief Inspector of the county neighbourhoods, I will see additional resources on those teams. That's extra people to where we've been previously. Some of those are already on response, and there are further coming in over the next year. That's all as part of Operation Uplift. As part of that as well, we've had the Operation Reach teams. I will warn you, there's lots of operation names as we go along, and I'll try and explain what each of them are, but you might recognise some of them from the media. So the Operation Reach teams are proactive neighbourhood teams on each area. It's a sergeant and 6 officers on each area, and they landed October last year. That's additionality to what we've had previously. So you've got one Rushcliffe, one at Newark and Sherwood, one at Bassett Law, and they are directed by their neighbourhood policing inspectors to do a lot of the enforcement and engagement activities for issues on their area that will naturally be rural crime issues for our beats where we've got rural crime problems. The city has op-reach teams as well, but they will focus on residential burglary and shop theft that's a problem within their towns. So the reach teams have landed, and that is some additionality. Tasks is to make sure they are in the direction of the rural crime issues, which we've seen on the Rushcliffe South area when they've deployed Operation Sahara, which is in response to some of the plant and machinery theft in the South Notts area, which we'll probably come on to into detail a bit more. We've also had some additionality into our operational support departments, which is our road crime unit and our road policing teams. They're two new teams that haven't been in existence over the last few years, and their role is to proactively police our roads and all of our arterial routes where we get criminals coming into our area to commit crime. There's a fairly boring but not complicated bidding process where I can get those teams onto our areas, and that goes through the neighbourhood police inspector identifying issues on their area, cross-border criminals coming in and stealing plant from farms, bid for the road crime team, and then they are deployed onto the area that we've identified as a hotspot. So that's some further additionality. You may see them, you may see a more road crime presence in your areas, but the deployments that we've had since they've started have been during the night, as you would expect for those overnight offences, so they may not be officers that you've seen, but the reach teams and the increased neighbourhood policing I definitely would expect you to see, certainly in the future. In terms of, so that's additionality. In terms of training, we've trained 25 wildlife crime officers, so they're existing officers who are qualified as accredited wildlife crime officers across the force, and Christian oversees the work that they do. I appreciate that wildlife crime and rural crime are different elements, but quite often rural crime is committed to facilitate the wildlife crime, and we've had some success with some hare coursing incidents, and Christian's been doing some work on how we can improve our response to hare coursing and poaching type offences. Officers in our rural communities have also had large animal handling training at Brackenhurst College. It was delivered last year, and that came after some feedback from farmers and animal owners such as yourselves that cops were turning up and didn't know how to deal with a herd of cattle on the road, and had some incidents where they'd not dealt with horses appropriately because they didn't have that training. So that's been delivered to all of our rural officers. And I'm talking across the whole of the county, not just the Newark and Sherwood and Bassett Law areas. There's various continued professional development events that I have started releasing our officers for. So there's a agricultural event at JCB World, which I've got 4 very excited officers going to next week. They have me when they come back. And do you want to go?
I do. Well, my best experience so far has been police and crime commissioner. I've got to confess, you were there, Andy. You got me to drive. I got to drive a tractor. How excited was I?
Well, you did beam somewhat.
There'll be no fun, Commissioner. I need to have a report back about what the officers are getting when. So when they go to these events, the purpose is to identify best practice, identify kit and equipment and way that we can improve. They come back, will brief me, and then that will form part of my strategy about how we pick up some of those bits that we can improve our response. So there's a number of different events that different officers have gone to that are relevant for their specific area. Andy's offered to deliver some training days as well for our rural beat managers, which I will be taking them up on and will be in my plan moving forward. So you've sent some of your wildlife crime officers on advanced badger practitioner training to look at how we can improve some of those criminal investigations and then the subsequent sanctions at court. Cybercrime is becoming of concern and having an impact in the rural communities. So the national lead for cybercrime is a sergeant based in Merseyside. So I had him attend the regional enforcement group that I chair and brief all of the leads on how we can feed into their operations and their work and use some of the digital tools to improve our investigations. So whilst we're focused here about what's happening in Nottingham, it's really important for me that the rural crime offer and investigations in our bordering forces are improved as well, because their offenders are travelling to our area and vice versa. Again, from yourselves, I had feedback that officers, so if you get a wildlife crime officer turn up to your hare coursing incident, great, they'll know what they're talking about. If you get an officer that hasn't had that training, I've had feedback from yourselves that they are ill-informed and unable to deal with that incident and don't understand the impact of it. So to tackle that, we've written a very basic rural crime toolkit that's downloaded onto every officer's app. It's on an app as their mobile phone. So if they get a hare coursing incident, they can go onto that app before they get to you, have a quick look at the legislation, the evidential aspects that need to be considering and be better informed when they come to you. Andy has shared with me a guide around seasonal crime trends, so that's enabled me to redistribute that message last month as we come into the season to try and remind those officers, because I can send these things out, but if they never look at it, they're not going to improve their response. So a lot of it is about kind of me continuing to push those messages to the cops that are coming out to your area. And I'm having lots of issues raised about the point of first contact, so the control room. So Andy Rook, back in 2019, delivered quite a comprehensive training package to the call takers in the control room. That doesn't seem to have had the legacy that I would have wanted, and I'm still hearing issues about call takers, particularly around trespassing offences. So they've had the Rural Crime Toolkit, they've had the reminder about if you are getting trespass offences called in at Rural Crime, please be aware it's potentially a precursor event. But I think we've still got some more work to do on there. One of the ladies from CLA kind of came up with the idea of doing a video for the call takers with yourself and Andy, to try and just keep pushing that message with the call takers and try and improve that point of first call. I think that's going to be a bit of a challenge to achieve, because the turnover within our control room is really high. And I used to be a firearms commander in the control room, so I'm really conscious that our call takers may be taking a firearms call, taking a suicide call, and then taking a call. So where that sits kind of on their emotional journey is not where we want their response to be. I'm working through an answer as to how we can improve that, because all these little bits aren't getting us there yet. So that's something that we still need to work on. And then, listening, I'm kind of open as to what other training that you think the officers would benefit from. If anyone's got any ideas, kind of open to that. So that's where we are now, where we're trying to get to. And I do see things moving very slowly in the right direction. But I won't be shy to say you've got myself, Christian and Simon, who are really enthusiastic, dedicated, committed cops who have got experience of delivering things, and really don't like talking hot air. So we hope that you'll actually start to see some small changes and see things moving in the right direction. And all three of us intend to be here for a while.
Thank you, Chief Inspector. It's good to hear that my offer of training has made it into the plan, because that's really important. And actually, I'm happy to be involved in training for your call staff
Yes.
as well. That it's not exclusively for the frontline guys. So you've heard enough for the time being. Peter, do you have a question?
I'll make a comment now, because Heather has just outlined some of the points I was going to raise beforehand. But the one I really wanted to emphasise, and I'm pleased you brought it up, Heather, this triaging and prioritisation of calls that go into the control room. There seems to be a complete lottery as to what sort of response you get, depending on who picks the phone up. And that's really seriously, you need some continuity of staff in there with experience. And all staff obviously have a break, they go off duty, then they come back on. But you need to ensure at all times you've got people in there with sufficient experience to cover rural issues. And I appreciate rural issues cover a vast majority, a whole gambit of areas. And so they have to be jack of all trades, but they need the experience and they need the training, and you need continuity of experience. And as you've said, you have a very fast turnover in the control room. I'm sorry, but serving the general public, we need more than that. We need experience in there, and there's no excuse for experience not to be in there, in my opinion.
There is experience within the managers and the supervisors within the control room to actually the public are speaking to. There is a really high turnover, as there is with a lot of call centres. One kind of idea that I'm toying with is a rural crime SPOC within the control rooms, probably at manager level. It has to be, if you're talking about that experience, because I can't train call takers for them to then go and work in a different call centre, to act as that kind of experience and guidance. The grading policy for kind of attendance is really clear, but Christian quite often reviews a lot of rural and wildlife crimes that come through the control room, and we find issues with some of them, don't we? So yeah, completely recognise it as an issue. Trying to work through it is one that I'm finding really difficult.
Yeah, it's very frustrating for the caller when they've got an incident that's going on that's obviously of paramount importance to them at the time, but you've got X going on in the middle of town, you've got Y going on the top side of Nottingham, and then we're down in Rushcliffe. That the caller will often, the handler will often say, "Well, we'll get to you when we can." Very frustrating.
It's frustrating for myself, Christian, as well, when we come on in the morning to see that there's been an incident which is contributing to something that we've been, working really hard over, and it's not had the response that we would expect. So I'm agreeing with you, and it's an area that we need to improve in.
Yeah. And if I may come back again, the follow-up with any individual officers that does attend can be very piecemeal because they go off duty, no one else takes on their, unless things have changed, that officer is assigned to that job, if you like, that incident number. You can't get in touch with that officer until they come back on duty again, rather than someone else taking on the responsibility for to whoever's being affected by it.
As part of my police and crime plan, and actually it shadows the beating crime plan, which is the government's intention. There is actually going to be measuring of the calls coming into the call centre, so just the 999 and the 101. I mean, my understanding is at the moment we're doing well on a 999. 999 calls are in the city area have to respond to within 15 minutes and 20 minutes in the rural areas, and we are hitting those targets. But we will continue to measure. And if there's been an incident where you don't think you've got the right response, I would really encourage you to put a complaint in, because that's how it. It's an unusual thing to say that I want complaints coming in, but that's how we can get better and work out what we're doing wrong. And I want to get better.
This is an issue about the control room grading and allocating the incident appropriately. Whatever grade it sits in does generally get the right response, but if it's not been put into a grade 1 response in the first place, then we're never going to meet that criteria. So this is absolutely about that kind of knowledge and understanding of it's not just a civil trespass offence. This is a precursor to thousands of pounds worth of crop damage for off-roaders committing hair coursing. That kind of understanding needs to be shared with the control room. I get that.
I think it's really important to emphasise that point, because what appears to the call handler to be somebody's walking where they shouldn't be walking, that could be somebody walking in the park or on the grass. That's not serious. But as you point out, some of the people in this room and some of the other people that were unable to be here are frightened to go into their farmyards at night because there are people trespassing in the neighbourhood, and there's sometimes, as you describe, a precursor, somebody scoping out a possible crime, and some of them are actively undertaking that. So it's really important, and I think you get it, but I need to emphasise that point really strongly. Yeah, thank you. Julian Powell.
Just to follow up on that, I also think that CPS and magistrates want educating.
Yes.
Because they just can't, I'm sure they can't be bothered if they think it's poaching or, what is that? Maybe some money's being taken, but it's not just that, is it? They don't just come and get over your fence and snare a few rabbits or whatever. It's just they smash through and let animals out, whatever. The other thing I was going to raise is, have we, or are we going to get more officers at Harworth? Because only 2 weeks ago I was told by a police officer that one of the sergeants that was there a few years ago, and he's only just left really, took his boss up to Gringley Hill, which is a good vantage point, and said, as far as you can see, that is my area, and I've got 2 officers. I can't do it. So, we'll never get anywhere really unless we've got more people on the road.
Inspector Neil Bellamy covers the workshop area, and I know he has got more officers than from when I first came in. But I can look into that. What was your first question? I'm sorry.
Well, it's just about the CPS and the magistrates being.
Thank you. Unusually, Nottinghamshire doesn't have its own criminal justice board. Most PCCs actually chair the criminal justice board, and that actually I think is really important. So I'm looking to bring in a criminal justice assurance board so I can understand more where the pinch points are in the criminal justice system, but also feedback to magistrates too. So that is something that is developing.
Can I just add to that? So in the regional enforcement group that I chair, we have a rural crime rep from the CPS, Leanne, who I work with. So I can't influence obviously the justice system, but Leanne is well linked in with us. And when Christian's leading on particularly wildlife crime investigations, we can seek early advice from Leanne, which is outside the scope of normal investigation of non-rural crime investigations. So she's linked in there. For the A1, where we see vehicle off-roaders go across kind of neighbouring farmland, I've submitted a statement within that court file that spells out the impact that it's having on the farming community, the cost implications to the business, to try and get the courts to see that this is a lot more than just a bit of fuel theft from a lorry driver. We were just chatting about some sanctions that we have as a result of some of the operations that we've ran on there. So last year, I think it was now, we had 4 people arrested as a result of one of the operations, and they were sentenced, but they didn't receive a custodial sentence. It was very disappointing. Their vehicles were seized, which is positive, and their equipment was seized. That's a cost implication for them. But that's something that can feed into, and we can try and influence it by those partnerships and by spelling out, presenting you basically and spelling out the impact that it has on you. But it's something that equally frustrates you. Christian, I don't know if you're able to speak briefly about the CBOs and CPNs that we've been looking at for some of the hair coursing offences. Just to put you on the spot. So when we don't get what we want, we sometimes look for other ways to get to it.
Yeah. So as you know, so I'm a neighbourhood sergeant, so I've got Sherwood, but also the wildlife crime side of things. So the big thing for me is, obviously we've increased the numbers of wildlife officers, but the big thing is education. So it's getting to know all the officers to understand the poaching side of things and what we can do. Now the issue we have with poaching, as you're probably aware, is you'll have trespassers on your land and you'll phone the police and you'll say you've got a vehicle or persons on the land, will turn up, and then if they don't, if they're not committed a poaching offence, it's very difficult to prove. So we've approached other forces who are doing things differently, and they're looking at like warning letters. So the plan will be is to basically issue a warning letter. So it's a bit like it's called a community protection notice, where it's a case of you commit an offence by trespassing. We believe you're poaching. If you continue to commit the offence on this land, then obviously we can look at prosecution. So it's given that warning. So other forces are using very similar. We've done something at the moment with our legal team, which has been reviewed. So we're hoping in the next month or so, that's something we can use as a tool for low-level poaching crime offences that we can't prove.
Thank you. There's a question near the back there, I think, from Vera Oxby.
Thank you, Commissioner, for coming, and it's nice to meet you.
Thank you, Vera.
Can you hear me all right?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. I am a victim of crime, which happened in March, but that's all been sorted. But a fortnight ago, I had got the outside door open, and at 7:30 to 7:45, a man stood there, and I said, "Can I help you?" And he said, "Have you got any scrap to sell?" So I said, "No." So outside, behind a tree, so my camera on the house wasn't able to pick up the registration number, was a gypsy type van, a white one with, the usual one. And I said, "Have you got a card?" He said, "No." He said, "I'm going down into the village and I will drop you one off on my way back." He said, "We've got another lorry and the driver of that lorry has got the cards." He said, "I've got my mate with me in the truck." So I said, what is your name? So he gave me a name, which I've forgotten, and the address was Cockgrave, which I gave to Sue, Sue Gadd, and I think she's sort of followed things up a bit. So Neil, who works for me, came 1 hour later, and I told him, and he said, oh, they're down in the village. So I said, okay. He says, they're parked up and going from house to house. I then had an egg customer come to the house, and I told them, and they said, oh, it's on Facebook. Their wife had read about this man being in the village of Kinolton on the Wednesday and making himself a nuisance. After he had left, I rang 101 and told them, and the person who answered the phone said, what has he done? I said, nothing, but I said, I am a victim of crime and I feel frightened. So she didn't sort of say anymore. She said, I'll take the message, and I gave her the name and address in Cockgrave, which he had given me. After Neil had been, I rang 101. It took me 20 minutes before anybody answered the phone. So I told them, I said, he is actually in the village. I left the beat manager 2 messages, and he hasn't come back to me at all. This is the beat manager at Cockgrave. After my customer told me that about this being on Facebook, I then rang 101 again and told them, and they actually gave me a reference number, and I said, I'm trying to get in touch with the beat manager at Cockgrave, and she said, I will send an email to him and ask him to contact you. From that day to this, I have not seen or heard from anybody. And I must admit that what happened to me in March affected me more than I thought it would do. And that man standing at the door, I'm looking out for him all the time. I am frightened.
Who would like to respond to Vera?
Yeah, Vera, I'm really sorry to hear you're frightened. I don't know if this case, but it's not right that you're at home and not feeling safe. You have to say anything.
Yeah, I mean, I can't, it would be wrong for me to comment on your kind of specific incident without looking into it. I can grab, have you got the incident number on you? We can grab it off you afterwards, and I can look in, we can discuss afterwards, and I can look into your specific case, because I can't comment. Yeah, well.
But what I was looking for was somebody to just talk to me or contact me. Obviously, they've been in the village, and other people have noticed them, just to put my mind at rest, because having been a victim of crime, I know more or less who were involved in that, and this man who stood at the door could be connected to that gang, if you like, and they know all about me, obviously, because they've done observations before they committed this crime. And I do live on my own.
If we follow this up afterwards,
I think that's the best way. I think Vera, maybe have a chat with them after the meeting, because it's kind of specific to you. But we shouldn't dismiss it, because Vera is particularly vulnerable because she lives on her own, and she was a victim of a quite significant crime earlier in the year. But actually, it's a story that we hear quite often, I think.
Thank you, Sharon.
I think there's probably kind of 2 bits which I think kind of come out. So something that's worrying is we have a neighbourhood hub who look at crime prevention, and there are crime prevention within the hub who, before I did the Farmers Kitchen events, I had a kind of idea that the crime prevention officers would come out to rural communities who've been a victim of crime, do a site assessment, risk assessment, and look at ways of improving security at that location. But at the event, I heard from everybody that no matter how you've tried to improve your security, it actually results in more damage being caused. So if you put a bigger lock on, it just means they're going to make a bigger hole. And if you put metal gates, it just means they're going to rip down. So I think CCTV, really big financial investment, just put a hood on, lights, great, there's nobody to see them in the lights. So I've kind of parked that idea for a minute in how we feel more secure and kind of less isolated in your isolated communities. It's again a tricky one. We've got crime prevention officers who can come out and do that assessment, but I think I need to put them doing some specific rural kind of more research into how we safeguard and target rural communities, because I think if it came out as we are in it and suggest a bigger lock, it's just not going to work, is it? So that's something I'm taking away from our conversations with yourselves. And what else did you prompt me to talk about? Fly tipping.
Yeah, and target hardening is just police speak for could be a target.
I know Vera has spent quite a lot of money on CCTV equipment to try and make her property a little bit more secure.
So, sorry if I may add, your story made me think about illegal waste carriers. Obviously, if that gentleman was a legal scrap dealer and was, asking door to door if anybody had scrap they wanted to get rid of, that's not it might have upset having him there. That is an offence, but illegal scrap dealing and illegal fly tipping, and then the illegal scrap dealers who collect and dump waste is obviously, I know, of concern to yourselves. So I think you're probably bored of me saying that the local authority are the lead on fly tipping, but we as the police do have a role to get involved in the partnership approach to that. Some of the local authorities have been doing some considerable work fly tipping, and the update that I've had from Rushcliffe Borough Council is around WISE, so the private sector enforcement contractors that they've had running for the last 2 years as a pilot, which they have confirmed they are extending for a further year. So they issued 2,152 fixed penalty notices for environmental crime, but that's more dog fouling, littering, that kind of stuff. But 52 fly tipping fixed penalty notices for domestic people, offenders, and 8 fly tipping fixed penalty notices for business offenders, and they've all been paid. The fly tipping reports for them have gone from 116 to 80 a month reports, because I do think that's a true figure and not due to lack of reporting, and that's the lowest number in 4 years. So I've certainly seen an increased response, certainly from Rushcliffe and Newark and Sherwood District Council around fly tipping, and I know Newark and Sherwood have got operations to tackle illegal areas, like I think you're kind of alluding to there.
My own view, because you're absolutely right, fly tipping is not really always a police matter, except for the fact that the fly tippers are often committing other crimes. Maybe their vehicles are illegal or not taxed or whatever. I think actually the PCC has a significant role to play in fly tipping, because you have the ability to influence some of those other parties and do that cross fertilisation.
And we do. In the crime safety partnerships, in the Snake and Haywood boards, I meet with the leaders of the different council and representatives and do have conversations, because it's such a blight, it's such a pain, it's such an expensive thing to get when it's dumped on your land. I mean, I hate litter anyway, but actually, when somebody has dumped some asbestos, it's going to cost you a fortune to get rid of. It's got to happen really seriously.
And in the meantime, you can't get to your crop or your livestock because the gate's blocked, and you can't move it because it's illegal to move it, and all of that sort of stuff.
Just to show you, those conversations do happen.
Robert Bealby.
Thank you. That's not echoing, is it now? Firstly, I have a friend who's in the control room, and when I hear some of the stories that she tells me, I think we do very well, and they do very well, but they would like some more staff. She is having to do extra shifts regularly, and it's...
Can I just say, there is a turnover in our control room. It's a really tough job, but we are actually 105% at the moment, staff-wise.
Yeah, I don't know, but all I'm saying is she keeps getting called in for extra shifts, and so... it's hard work, and I do sympathise.
It is busy, and just to give you an idea, during COVID, the calls go down regularly now on a Saturday night. We're at New Year's Eve levels of control of calls coming in. It's like there's so many calls in, over 200,000 calls expected this year to the control room.
Well done, well done. I get looked after quite well with the police. Don't get me wrong. I'm not complaining about how I've been looked after. I think the wildlife crime that you talk about, I don't quite understand what wildlife crime is exactly, but when we farm fields, as we do, we try to keep people out, but they always find a way of getting in. And I'll be honest, if they've caught half a dozen hares, I really couldn't care less. There are another half dozen in the next field anyway. But the damage they've done to the crop while they've been in there is the big problem. Now, I don't know whether that is against the law or not, but we can't claim against them unless somebody actually catches them at it. And they'll say, oh, we didn't do all that. We only came in for a minute. Somebody else must have done that last night.
Yeah.
You know, we can't prove it. But one of our biggest grudges at the moment is not a personal grudge, but we've got 50-mile-an-hour limits all around us now. Yeah, they're a bit of a nuisance. We can't get there quite as quick as we used to. But we do have one or two people who don't seem to understand the 50-mile-an-hour limit. And they are very, very noisy at night.
Yeah.
There have been some complaints put in. So somebody comes out with a camera for half an hour and goes home and says, I only caught one person. Well, I'm sorry, but that's not enough. You need to be visible, doing something to try and slow these people down. It's, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock at night, they're screaming about. And, you can hear them a mile away. I sleep, well, nobody stops me sleeping, but a lot of my friends don't sleep quite so well. So speeding on the road, I think, is one of the priorities that you really ought to try and get put right. Thank you.
Can I come to Christian for Operation Bifocal?
Bifocal, yeah.
Yeah, for the hair coursing.
Right, so I can answer one because the wildlife crime, I've basically just updated what wildlife crime is. So obviously we look at rural crime and wildlife crime. So wildlife crime, we look at bat persecution, badger persecution, poaching. So bat persecution falls under the wildlife crime. So basically where bats live, trees, that sort of thing. So any crime allegations of, where bats nest or have been disturbed, that will come to us under wildlife crime. Badgers, poaching can fall into anything in relation to deer, hare, anything that comes under poaching, even fishing. So that falls into us as well. Then you've got CITES, which is basically the importation and stuff of like ivory. That can also fall to us. So the wildlife crime thing, there's pretty much a big umbrella. And then obviously part of that, so the way we tackle poaching and wildlife crime, we have a number of operations. So I'll just read out another operational name. So one is Up Bifocal. So that is an umbrella that all the region use. So Up Bifocal is it's a cross-border operation we run to tackle specifically poaching offences. So we'll work with our colleagues in Lincolnshire and Derbyshire on weekends and with a number of officers, and we'll tackle those sort of offences under that umbrella. We've then got Up Jericho, which is tackle off-road vehicles. Up Traverse is the fishing and poaching one. We work with our colleagues in the EA. So the Environment Agency have a number of their enforcement officers we work really closely with, and obviously they've got a number of powers to tackle poaching as well. So we work with them under Up Traverse. Up Magna is our A1 diesel theft, so that's another operation that we look at. So you'll forget all the operational names, but yeah, so that's what wildlife crime is. Any other questions?
Well, I'll just say that personally, if you want to come fishing in the river, you catch a couple of fish. I couldn't care less. If you want to snare a rabbit in the hedge bottom, I'm not too worried. It's the damage that you might be doing to do that crime that worries me personally. These people caring about the fields, we've got a lot of remote land. We don't live on all our land. We live in the farmhouse, but we don't live half a mile away, and you can't hear it at night. I can't. I just sleep. But they just tear about all over the place. We spend all our time putting barriers up, gates up. Just chop a hedge down and drive straight through it. I mean, they're not bothered.
Yeah.
Commissioner, do you want to respond?
Is the damage they do to the crops. If they take a hair, doesn't matter. They snare up. Crikey, you can go back 200 years doing that.
Yeah.
It's nothing new. You take an odd one. Yeah, you get them going in with the electric things into the river and killing 1,000 fish and netting them all up. Yeah, you're welcome. Come and do something about it. But don't bother about somebody who's just fishing there with a hook.
I think Operation Bifocal that was just spoken about, one of the things they take really seriously is the hair coursing, because with the hair coursing there's some really nasty organised criminal activity as well. Often it's syndicated to China. There's some dirty money being bet on it as well. I mean, no, it's and violence and intimidation there too. So it is taken very, very seriously. We know it's damaging your land, but also it's something we want to stop in Nottinghamshire.
Can we come to Simon for an opportunity just to talk about the off-road biking team, because that's contributing to the crop damage. I'm conscious that we're running out of time, but off-road biking obviously is a symptom of haircutting, trespassing for theft offences, and a number of other offences. So
come across, Simon, get on camera.
And the AS.
Yeah. Stop. Done. Thank you.
And the fuel fest. So Simon's the sergeant for the off-road bike team, so I'll just kind of give him an opportunity to update on what we're doing and the work we've got towards.
So what is a bike, please, before you go on? Sorry, what is a bike?
Motorcycle, off-road motorcycle.
Thank you.
So since
not a quad.
Well, no. So Simon's work will impact the quad bikes and the motorbikes as well.
Right. Okay.
Here's the bike. So here's the police team.
Both types.
So here's the police team who are on motorbikes that enforce against quad bikes, off-road bikes, Land Rovers, any kind of activity that you've talked about that causes the crop damage, where actually a police car wouldn't be able to get. Then Simon's team come in and, well, we'll hear what they do.
Thank you.
So I've run the off-road bike team for a number of years now. We've been on skeleton staff for quite some time. However, in March 12th, the start of the year, by March, we managed to get 56 riders. So I've now got a team with 16 riders. We are part-time, so it's not a full-time role, but I do manage to deploy most weekends. We sometimes deploy in the week as well. And this year, from March onwards till now, we managed to deploy at least 45 times. I think some other times which we sort of dipped in operationally as well. So for a part-time team, we are getting out quite a lot. There's a bidding process for that. So in order to get the team, we go through. You'll have heard Heather talk about it. I'm reliant on being told where needed. So if you have some issues, then you really do need to bring it to the attention of the local policing team in order for them to then hit and say, we need the team over here. We can set up operations, we can just do a patrol, but in order to actually get out, we need to know where to go. So things like the crop damage, what we'll do if we're say, for instance, we come to workshop, we'll go see the farmers. Very often, if people see us out, by people I mean those that we're targeting, they're very quick on the mobile phones. They'll let their friends know that we're out and about. And you probably, when we get there, we may not even see a bike all day. But that's unfortunately the impact. Well, I say fortunate, unfortunate. But, for that day, we don't actually see anybody. We've actually done our job. Nighttime operations we can't do at the moment because of the dangers around it. However, we're looking at some lighting options, and it may be that if you are getting specific issues that are targeting your land, that we can do a specific operation for that. But we'd have to look into that, and as I say, we're looking at policy issues around lighting, and we may be able to do that in the future. So at the 45 deployments we get all around the county, so most areas we cover, including the city. There's a lot of inner city areas where there are woodland issues, but so off-road we'll do anything off-road, so we'll do quarries, we'll do fields, we'll do woodland, anywhere where there's an issue basically. We won't go anywhere where there's no issues because we can damage the as much as those that we're looking for. This year, the deployments we've issued out 35 Section 59 warnings. So they're like your antisocial behaviour notices where people are riding on or off the road, causing damage, antisocial behaviour. They get 2 of them, they get bike seized. So we've issued quite a number of those, and we've had 11 seizures whilst we've been out and about. We've arrested 3 people as well, so disqualified drivers also ride off road. and we'll catch them on the road as well when we're out and about, various drugs offences, that type of thing. When we do go out, we'll often use the drone as well. We're trying to use that more because that gives us a better opportunity of going where we need to go. So it's all right us patrolling around, but if we're not seeing anybody, then that day the farmers may only actually see the yellow jackets in the field. So we're trying to use the drone a lot more on our operations to just be able to target where we need to be, to save sort of just riding around aimlessly, really. We will engage with everybody that we come across. You won't see us riding antisocially. You won't see us winding the throttle open, making a racket, making noise. We always ride respectfully. We train in house, so I embed them rules in all riders. So all in all, we're working to try and do much better. We're trying to be a bit more target specific. And if I can just appeal to everybody who wants to see the off-road team to contact the neighbourhood policing team, and we can target that area. They can bid for us through our tasking process, and we can see you there.
Just to cover off the engagement stuff that you're doing.
Oh yes, so in addition to the deployment side of things, we're also used for other things. So we'll assist with missing persons, whereas there's an off-road element to it. We attend events. We're also looking at, we put a package together recently for education. So we don't at present go into schools, but we do go into alternate provisions. So your alternate provisions are your sort of classic naughty kids type schools. They're not naughty kids, they're behavioural issues which require specific, they've got specific educational needs. So they are the people that we often need to target and to speak to educate in order to help them understand what they're doing is wrong. So we will go into those provisions, and we're also, as I say, looking at going into schools as well. So we're putting a specific package together in order to educate kids on the problems that they're causing, basically. So if they're going across a farmer's land, they don't see that as an issue. But obviously, if we can explain to them about the damage, the financial implications, etc., we might well get through to them.
Thank you.
Okay. And that community engagement with young people is really important. I've seen it in action. I've seen the chief drone pilot showing what his drone could do. I've seen the off-road motorcycle team with engaging with young people who perhaps, we need to build relationships with the police, with those young people to trust the police, and have those helpful conversations. So I've seen them in action. It's very, very impressive.
Just to reiterate what Simon was saying about the reporting, I don't know if you're all aware, but there's an online reporting tool now, so you don't need to sit on the phone to 101 waiting for them to answer. If you go onto the Nottinghamshire Police website, there's a link there to report an incident online, so you can report it. That gets fed through to our morning meetings, and then if they can identify a trend on a specific area, they can bid through for Simon's team to deploy to your area.
Thank you, Christian.
One of the things that I've been asking for has been sort of highlighted a little bit there. So when we first met some months ago, I think I had 3 asks.
I remember.
And
you want better training. The police understood rural crime issues more. You want the better equipment for the police officers, and more people to do it.
Yeah, and specifically dedicated rural team. I think that's really important because Sergeant Whitehouse clearly has got some of the right equipment. He's got the bikes, he's got the drone, but he's having to do it in his spare time. And I think that's a really big issue. What we suffer from, and actually, this is nationwide, what we suffer from is in every county, but specifically in Nottinghamshire, we suffer from police who've got day jobs and are busy doing their job. They're doing the best they can, and I'm sure they're stretched.
Yeah.
And getting out into the countryside is a difficult task for them. Where we differ from many of our neighbouring, if possibly all of our neighbouring counties, is that we don't have a dedicated rural team of professional officers. Yeah. And I think that's really important. Very anxious to press that point.
I'm listening, but I don't want something tokenistic. I don't just want to shout about having a rural crime team, but actually I want it through the whole force. I want there to be an understanding through the whole force. So I'm working out the best way of doing that. It is really important with it for our rural community. But I want to make sure that we have a real understanding, not
I attended a rural policing event in North Leicestershire not long ago, and there were some really good examples there. I think Warwickshire in particular came out with a very, very strong team of people there. And I completely agree. We mustn't have a token effort. And I think that we could perhaps have been accused of that in the past. I think we had a team of rural specials for a little while. And that isn't what I'm asking for. I'm asking for professional officers. And we do need all of the officers to take rural crime seriously. But a dedicated rural team, I think, would help crack down on some of these issues. So I'm hoping I'm going to see that in the plan.
I'm taking it really seriously. But I want something that's going to deliver, and I want, I don't just want a name. I want something that's going to deliver. Yeah.
Harriet.
Thank you. The Chief Inspector mentioned earlier about people who are travelling in and out of the county to commit crimes. How often do you work with your neighbouring forces, and how well do you think that's going? Because there is a lack of a national rural crime database, which means that unless you guys are communicating efficiently, effectively and frequently, things are dropping through the cracks, especially in the south of the county. And then secondly, to the PCC, you mentioned earlier that you had a successful bid to try and boost the vulnerability of women and girls who feel vulnerable. How was that split? Did any go into the rural communities? Because until you've been lambing a sheep or a cow in a shed at 2 o'clock in the morning and can hear shots being fired or lights coming up your drive, knowing you're 5 miles from civilization, you don't know the meaning of the word vulnerable. There are no CCTV cameras on our rural roads, and people like Vera, who have experienced this for themselves, did that bid go to support any of the rural communities?
The most recent bid went to support the town centre and Mansfield town centre. No, sorry, it's Sutton and Ashfield. Works up with the last two bids. I've got a bid in at the moment. It's for the city centre. So I can't imagine what that would have been like lambing and hearing those gunshots. It's really tricky.
Whereabouts do you live, if you don't mind asking, or just the area?
Yeah. I can assure you that we do work cross border. I mean, you're the lead for the region to do that, because the criminals do come in and out, and they don't respect the county lines, which is one of the reasons that the ANPR is so important. I want to get automatic number plate recognition. I want to get a ring around our county to help with that.
So in the South Notts, there's been an identified issue with cross-border theft, where we've had nominals coming across border, stealing on our area, and then going off. We do have a shared intelligence database, so not all, but a lot of police forces are now on Niche. I don't know if you heard it. That's just our crime recording system, but that's our intelligence system as well. So if Derbyshire put a nominal on Niche with an intelligence feed about them, I can see that. If they put a marker on a vehicle to say that we've got intelligence that this vehicle's involved in plant machinery theft, that will flag up on our areas as well, on our ANPR cameras. So we do have a shared intelligence and crime database. So Ops Sahara has picked up a cross-border issue with theft, and that was launched in October last year. It started off with a reactive enforcement stage, so the warrants executed, property recovered and persons arrested. That investigation is still with CID. The fact that it got to CID is a real positive for me and a step in the right direction, because it shows the level of commitment that it's sitting with qualified detectives rather than neighbourhood policing officers. That continues in a more kind of proactive response through Rob Lawton, who's the inspector for Rushcliffe, and he runs Sahara every month. So in June, this is a nighttime operation, and this is about having officers on the roads, on those arterial routes, stopping the cross-border criminals coming across. The updates from June were 44 vehicles stopped, 7 searched, 13 drivers reported for various road traffic offences and 3 vehicles seized. The last deployment, 12 vehicles stopped, 4 reported for traffic offences, 3 seized, and a number of intelligence stops and a number of legitimate vehicles stopped as well, and asked to account for. There was one vehicle that had a engine in the vehicle that we had to confirm was legitimate. I think that tells me 2 things: that the operation is effective, but also that it does need to continue, because we're seizing all these vehicles and identifying all these offences when we run that operation. That operation isn't run every night. It involves the road crime team, the additionality that I talked about earlier, coming onto a specific area to run that operation. I don't know if that makes you feel any safer that those operations are being run, and 44 vehicles were stopped during the one in June. So that's the kind of South Notts response to it. You talk about the kind of the national link in. So we have Operation Opal, which is I've lost all my notes, which is the national response to serious and organised crime, and I get a monthly report from them which highlights themes and trends. This month it was lead theft from church roofs, agricultural thefts. We've had GPS thefts in there in the past. So that information gets fed into Operation Opal at a national level, and then gets fed back down to us for us to take whatever action or identify whether that's an issue in our area. So there was some prevention advice and kind of awareness shared around the GPS thefts. Cross-border offenders were involved in those thefts, and I was able to make sure that those markers were on the vehicles that were relevant for our area. So I don't know how I communicate that with you to reassure you, because a lot of what you're talking about is, you don't know that any of this is going on. Some of it, I can't share with you everything that we're doing, because it's just an absolute kind of vast amount of work. But, the kind of things that you mentioned there, I feel are in place, with the kind of Operation Opal stuff, which is that national cross-border sharing of information. And as the Commissioner said, I chair the Regional Enforcement Group, where we sit there and go, we've had a load of thefts. I think it's your guys. What thefts have you had? Right, well, we've identified it's this vehicle. What have you had? And then out of that will come the operational activity and the road crime team targeting those vehicles. And I actually see the document where there is that van with that registration number, and it's got those markers on it, and it gets stopped.
So the question was, what was the frequency of those meetings? I mean, a monthly meeting seems far too long apart between the meetings. So the Regional Enforcement Group is every 3 months. The national group is every 6 months. That's a national programme that's, in all honesty, meeting more frequently than that would water it down too much. That is a strategic level group where I sit with leads for each force to feed the more kind of strategic patterns and trends. Every fortnight there's a local operations meeting, which I also chair with my neighbourhood policing inspectors. So down from that, every morning we have a demand management meeting. Inspectors will go through all of their crimes and incidents that have happened in the last 24 hours, and they'll say, I've had a spate of plant machinery go on South Notts. We've identified that it's this area. The local intelligence officer will then be given tasks or warrants, or try and look who we can identify as an offender. Out of that, Inspector Lawton will come into the local operations fortnightly meeting and say, I want to bid for the road crime team to come and do an Op Sahara because I've identified a pattern and trend. And then we bid for them through the force tasking process, and then they get deployed on area. So there's quite a layered meeting structure that feeds into all of that kind of management. In terms of the kind of cross-border question, that is every 3 monthly, but that's not to say that the LIO for South, the local intelligence officer for South Notts, will phone the local intelligence officer for the neighbouring forces if they've got an issue that they think involves each other, and then we have that formal database to share any kind of intelligence if there's stuff that we don't know exists.
I think if I may just respond briefly, I think that strategic level is important, but I think at a local level they need a more day-to-day system, and it does worry me a little bit. I talk from time to time with a little gang of your officers in the South Notts area who have approached me to find out initially about the GPS thefts. Actually, they came to me, but since then it's become a regular thing, and it worries me that at a strategic level it may look like it's working, but maybe they need more help on the beat, so to speak. I don't know whether that's the truth, but I don't know why those officers will be coming to me on a regular basis. I think we're doing a Teams meeting about every 2 months. If they were getting all the information they needed, they wouldn't need to be asking me. So I think there's a need at a very local level to connect up between the counties. That's in South Notts, but I wouldn't mind betting the same would be true in North Notts and East and West too. I think what I'm hearing is all the right words, but maybe we just need to dig into it and scratch the surface to make sure it's working at the bottom, because that's where it's most important to these guys. So I didn't mean to speak over you.
If I could just go back to the lady who was lambing, could I have your advice, please? What can we do to make you feel safer? With my bid for Worksop, it was quite specific. I listened to the women and girls in Worksop. They said they felt safer if they had better street lighting, if they had CCTV, if we did some safe places people could go to. There's some training which is going into schools about what health relationships are. How boys and men should treat women. It was a package around what we could do and what works. We identified the real need for it there. We put a really strong bid, evidence led, if we got the money. What could I do in a rural area to make you feel safer?
I think a really good starting point is the improved offer ANPR that was mentioned in more rural areas.
Yeah.
Certainly that starts to flag where you've got repeat offenders. That's a good starting point. But having more visible patrols in rural area with regularity, so that it is not just a great big black spot for anybody to do what they fancy as they drive past, knowing it's highly unlikely a squad car is going to go past in the next 10 minutes. The vulnerability of farms, which are houses as well as businesses, being so remote from where any of the police bases are, is what makes it a really easy target for any type of crime.
Yeah.
So to improve the vulnerability of any rural crime, it is increasing the number of people in those rural areas looking after us.
Thank you.
Lady in the back row.
Your taxes there, Vera.
Thank you, Vera.
Christian, can you just go and get the incident number?
It's so interesting. I've gone a bit over time. Okay. There's 2 more questions. Thank you, Vera. Yeah.
Christian's good.
Thank you.
I'll be very brief. It's really just a plug on behalf of the Farming Community Network in Nottinghamshire that we are there to support all families, farming families that have been victims of rural crime, so we can help support the NFU in the training and awareness raising for the police force to ensure that when there has been a crime, that there's that support in the aftermath of the crime by ourselves who understand farming, who can perhaps provide that continuity after the event, after the police support has been and gone.
Yeah.
We're there for you afterwards.
Can I just ask about that? Because I commission Victor Care Support Service. Do they link with you at all? Okay. We could catch up afterwards. That'd be really helpful. Yeah.
One question down here. We'll see whether we've got time, Robert. We'll try to get to you.
Thank you. 3 quick points. Just want to re-emphasise the necessity for the judiciary to take seriously crimes that the police have spent hard-earned hours actually detecting and bringing people to book. Because unless there's a sufficient deterrent, people are just going to re-offend. And rural crime is an easy target for re-offending. So we need the judiciary to back up the police force. So, that's another message that really needs to come out in your plan, please. One other point was, I don't expect you to give me detail on this or anything, but surely there'll be some sort of infiltration and smart policing going on behind the scenes in rural crime, rural policing. One would hope, he said. Infiltration into potential areas that might be targeted, regions of the country, areas within the region, types of crime that are emerging and that you might be aware of that others aren't. And some sort of undercover infiltration perhaps might be going on. I'll just leave it there. But my main point was, where are we in firearms licensing in Nottinghamshire? And is there, are we up to date with getting process applications and grants and inspections?
Are you okay to pick the firearms one?
I can't answer that firearms one, Peter. That's a completely different department. So Georgia Newton's the inspector there. I can get an update to you after this meeting, if that's okay.
Yeah.
That firearms licensing sits with our firearms department. That it is out of my sphere of work.
Rural crime, but
yeah.
It affects a lot of.
Yeah. I did ask about firearms a couple of months ago. It was sadly after the Plymouth incident when
I appreciate there's been a review.
Yeah. But at that time there wasn't a terribly long wait. You know, nationally, you know where we are in the league tables of how long you had to wait was okay. But we can get back and have a look.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One last question from Robert, and then I'll do a bit of a summary.
Yeah, it's more a summary, I guess. I think most farmers aren't here in our area, and we're all very, very crime weary.
Yeah.
The last 10 years I've been getting involved in police meetings like this, and you know, we thank you for coming, but we always hear the same thing. At the end of the day, in our region, North Bassetlaw, from beyond Tuxford right in the north to Mizzen, we've still got only two beat managers. We've lost the best beat manager we had in Jason Fellows, who got us all involved in Operation Bifocal, and we really felt we were making some progress there.
Yeah.
I think now we all feel that, you know, we're almost back to square one. We've seen a bit of a reduction in rural crime, but I think a lot of that is to do with the measures we've taken, locking gateways up, digging grips and gaps in hedges, you know, doing the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I think you underestimate the economic impact of us having to do all that. It's not just the cost of going and digging out gateways.
Yeah.
It's then the cost when we want to go and spray or fertilise or work that field. We've got to make a special trip with a JCB to go and fill that field in or move those bales,
Yeah.
and then come back, go down to that field, do your job, come back, then go back and lock it all up again.
Yeah.
It's a huge impact on the farming community. This there's been no increase in boots on the ground, you know, in our area. Well, certainly not in the rural area in our beat managers. We're also fortunate we had in Dave area a very good PCSO who's retiring, I think, early next year. And, you know, we just feel that we're weary of crime. We're having to sort it out ourselves, you know. You know, we're all out in the middle of the night when we hear fours go by our houses. We've tried to, you know, with Jason Fellows in particular, bring cases against these criminals, and the cases have just been kicked back because we haven't had enough evidence. One breath we're saying, don't approach these people. The next breath, when it comes to going to court, we're being told, well, you can't positively identify that driver's face. So, you know, sorry that, you know, I think that's what a lot of the farming community are feeling like at the moment. You know, we have had other meetings. I'm on the police and the police priority setting.
Yeah. Is that when Neil Bellamy in Worksop?
In Retford.
Yeah.
Through the parish council on that. So, you know, for the last 10 years, I've tried to put a lot of input into this. I know Julian has. And, you know, do feel that we're just not making enough progress.
So, Police Crime Commissioner and Chief Inspector, I want to thank you for coming along with some of your team here. That's a really downbeat note to finish on, but actually it reflects the story that I hear from farmers all the time. And and rural crime, you know, they've actually, I think they've been very gentle on you and very polite today. They don't always use that kind of language. I think maybe the fact that this is going out on Facebook tempered their mood a little bit.
I didn't do it for that reason.
But you know, so I'm really hoping that this is kind of approaching the end of your Have Your Say sessions. This is feeding into your police and crime plan for the county, which I think is coming out for consultation later this month. I really hope that we will see some real changes, because you were elected in no small part on your rural commitment. We've seen promises from government, and I know you can't necessarily deliver what government promises, but there are promises from government for, I think, 20,000 more officers.
Yes.
And you know, I think we need about 8 rural officers, so that will make a big hole in the government's 20,000. If you could get 10 or 12, that would be better. But you know, we need to see a difference. These guys, one or two of them today said they nearly didn't bother coming because, you know, they're tired of doing this kind of thing. So you know, I think we need to see a plan that looks like it's going to deliver, and we've got to give Chief Inspector and the team the tools that they need to do what they clearly desperately want to do. So I guess I want to thank the audience for coming in this afternoon and for giving up their time at the show today. Thank you very much for that. And we look forward to seeing the draft of your plan very shortly. Thank you very much.
Thank you.